These are the craziest drug-filled NBA nightmares that you won't believe. And starting out with Willie Cauley-Stein, the Kings 2015 selection had one of the wildest fentanyl-filled roller coasters that you've ever heard. Now, unless you're a Sacramento fan, you probably remember Willie best during his days in college playing at Kentucky. Playing alongside D Book and Karl Anthony Towns, Willie was the defensive stopper, drafted way too high in a 2015 draft class with a ton of buzz. I mean, at 9 points and 6.4 rebounds, drafted 6th to the dusty-ass Kings, Cauley-Stein just wasn't in a position to succeed. It appeared that next to DeMarcus Cousins, he was going to be the defensive stopper of the big man pairing. But in reality, Cauley-Stein was pretty average at best in his short NBA career, before fizzling out after his run with the Kings. The story might seem boring on paper, but really, Cauley-Stein's NBA career was nothing short of a real-life horror movie. Now, like I said, his career didn't exactly go to his liking. He came in as a defensive specialist, but on a poor Kings squad, his talents never shined. After putting up career highs of 13, then 12 points per game, peaking at 8.4 rebounds, Cauley-Stein would sign a contract with the Golden State Warriors. I mean, this was a fantastic landing place to spark the flame on his career and prove that he belonged. The Warriors, of course, are a fantastic franchise, and with a long-time hole at the center position, these guys really just needed an athletic rim runner to finish inside and defend the tin, and Cauley-Stein was waiting to prove that he was elite in this regard. Willie really would not put the world on notice before being moved to the Mavericks, where he would consistently see his play and minutes decline. You'd assume that he was likely struggling from some sort of confidence issue or something of the sort, but in reality, Willie Cauley-Stein was living in a darker world than you could imagine. Immediately after departing from the Kings, a series of dominoes would tip off that would send his life into a downward spiral. Around this time, 3 of his childhood friends were shot, one fatally. Nothing good can be drawn from a tragedy like this, but for Willie it was only the beginning. After playing his best basketball, Stein was very disappointed by the status of his career, landing a contract barely above the league minimum in Golden State. And shortly after, Stein's grandmother, who raised him from his early childhood, was diagnosed with terminal bone cancer. The downward pressure would not stop, and the only way that Willie found to lift it was numbing it. Starting small and growing over time, Cauley-Stein was popping bootleg Percocets like no one's business. Even with a child on the way, all it did was add pressure, and another reason to use and abuse his vice. While his grandma was, in his words, withering away, Willie couldn't stand to see the woman who raised him in that condition and would hide from his reality through taking fistfuls of Percocets on a daily basis. Everything was going downhill. After a decent first year with the Mavericks, it appeared this dude didn't give a fuck about basketball in a second. He was going through the motions on the floor, and off of it, this guy was a walking zombie. The team could tell I had no energy, no love, no personality, no nothing. The drugs took everything from me. Stein's career was at the end of its lifespan, scoring less than 2 a game. Stein lost the opportunity to really say goodbye to the woman who raised him, hiding behind drugs to avoid feeling his reality. He was a celebrity, a millionaire, and a professional athlete. Or really, he was living a life more similar to a junkie on the street. After the loss of his grandmother, Cauley-Stein realized the reality of his situation. Kids are popping a bad pill left and right and dying on the side of the road, and this guy can't go to practice or games without popping the same pills. Willie needed help, but doing so would put a target on his back and put his job into risk. But putting his health and his family first, Willie Cauley-Stein finally checked himself into a rehab service. He was a serious junkie. Not only was he taking copious amounts of pills per day at this point, but the rehab discovered that this guy was playing NBA basketball for years after popping fentanyl. This opened his eyes. A drug 100 times more potent than morphine and 50 times more than heroin. 70% of fake pills contain enough fentanyl to kill a man. Likely due to his large frame and growing tolerance, Cauley-Stein squeaked by. But in his own words, could easily have been killed by his addiction. Stein found a lot of pressures relieved through rehab, where for once he wasn't the NBA player and celebrity, but the same as the guys going through the same problems. Luckily, Willie was able to get the help he needed before a drug that kills over 50,000 people every year was able to take him out. Since his rehab stints, Stein was able to extend his career overseas where he can hopefully surround himself with a better group of people, but through his struggles, he left one of the wildest roller coaster stories in NBA history. Willie really was one of the lucky ones that was able to escape And tales like that of Eddie Griffin are the ones that put that into perspective. Eddie Griffin was nice as fuck on the court, but due to his own self-sabotage, was really just a wrecking ball of destruction that would fall victim to his own struggles, which were darker than you could imagine. Griffin's struggles began long before he set foot on an NBA floor. Born and raised in Philadelphia, he grew up without a strong father figure, an absence that left a deep void in his life. Despite his troubled upbringing, he quickly emerged as a prodigy. He was 6'10" with a sick jump shot, which was crazy at the time, was dunking on people's heads, and bullying people out of the painted area. It was crazy. However, his immense talents came with significant baggage. He had a reputation for being volatile and emotionally unstable. His temper often got the best of him, leading to frequent altercations. One such incident cost him his senior year of high school. Griffin was expelled after getting into a violent fight with a teammate. Normally, this kind of setback would kill a player's college chances, but Griffin was too talented to ignore. Despite his disciplinary issues, he landed a full-ride scholarship to Seton Hall University. In his lone season, Griffin showcased why he was considered a future NBA star. As a freshman, he averaged an impressive 18 points and 11 rebounds a game and a ridiculous 4.4 blocks, displaying a rare skill set as a shot-blocking stretch big at a time when that archetype was really non-existent. Yet, for all of his on-court brilliance, his off-court troubles continued. His temper flared once again when he punched a teammate during practice, splitting the player's lip open and requiring stitches. The incident cemented his reputation as a talented but completely unstable player, one who needed as much psychological support as he did on-court coaching. As a kid with a troubled background, he was dealing with a world of baggage and really just managed it in the worst way possible. But things took a devastating turn when Griffin's older brother passed away from a heart attack. Already grappling with emotional instability, this loss sent him further down a dark path. Unfortunately, fatherless kids is a growing epidemic, and for kids with this missing piece, they're really left grasping at the best they can find, and the only anchor he could reach for was unfortunately taken away. Griffin declared for the 2001 NBA draft after just one season with Seton Hall. Despite the glaring red flags, his talent was too enticing to ignore. The New Jersey Nets selected him with the 7th overall pick, but they immediately traded him to the Houston Rockets in exchange for 3 first-rounders. At the time, the move seemed like a no-brainer for Houston. Griffin was a unicorn, a player who could protect the tin and stretch the floor. Years before, that became a blueprint for a modern big man. Unfortunately, his NBA career never lived up to the hype. As a rookie, he averaged 9 points, just under 6 rebounds, and under 2 blocks a game. His shooting percentages were abysmal, hitting just 36% from the field. He struggled with the physicality and the pace of the NBA, but more than that, his personal demons continued to plague him. Drugs and alcohol became his escape, but they really only worsened his situation. Griffin's substance abuse were no secret. He missed practices, clashed with teammates, and found himself in constant trouble with the law. In 2003, he was arrested for marijuana possession. That same year, he was charged with assault after allegedly punching a woman 3 times during a domestic dispute. And by the end of his second season, his life was spiraling out of control. Things got so bad that he missed the entire 2003-2004 season while seeking help for his alcohol addiction. The Rockets cut ties with him, and it seemed his NBA career was hanging on by a thread. The Minnesota Timberwolves decided to take a chance, signing him to a low-risk contract in hopes that he could regain his form and maybe tap into that potential that seemed completely untouched. They believed that pairing him with Kevin Garnett might help stabilize him, and for a brief moment, it looked like Griffin might turn things around. In his first season with Minnesota, he provided solid rim protection and even showed some promise as a floor spacer, but his demons were never far behind. Timberwolves coaches and players saw firsthand the grip that alcohol had on him. Former coach Dwayne Casey later recalled how evident Griffin's drinking problem was and how the team did everything they could to help him. Kevin McHale, who was part of the team's front office, advised Griffin to seek help from John Lucas, a former NBA player and coach who ran a program specifically designed to help athletes struggling with substance abuse. Griffin entered the program in 2005 and completed it successfully, earning himself a contract extension with the Timberwolves. Still, the damage was done. Griffin's play steadily declined, his production dipped to just 4 points per game, and he found himself at the center of another embarrassing incident. One night, Griffin crashed his car into a parked vehicle outside a convenience store. Witnesses claimed that Griffin had been watching adult content on a portable DVD player while driving, and that the crash happened because he was preoccupied. When he stumbled out of the car, clearly intoxicated, he begged the other driver not to call the police, then wandered into the convenience store to buy more alcohol. Minnesota had seen enough. The Wolves released him in 2007, and with no other NBA team willing to take a chance on him, Griffin's basketball career was over at just 24 years old. Without basketball, the downward spiral accelerated. On August 17, 2007, just months after his release from the NBA, Eddie Griffin's life came to a tragic end. Around 1:30 a.m., Griffin ignored a railroad warning and drove his SUV through a barrier, colliding with an oncoming train. The impact caused a massive explosion, engulfing his vehicle in flames. His body was burned so severely that he had to be identified through dental records. An autopsy later revealed his blood alcohol content was 0.26, more than 3 times the legal limit. Eddie Griffin was just 25 years old. He left behind one of the darkest stories in basketball history, and possibly worst of all, a 3-year-old daughter now left fatherless, similar to himself. There have been many drug busts over the course of NBA history. But if you're looking for the biggest one, look no further, because let me tell you about the 1987 Phoenix Suns. Now, first things first, drugs were everywhere back then. I mean, players were getting caught with it left and right. It was getting bad, and after Len Bias, 2 days after getting selected with the 2nd overall pick in the 1986 draft, who died of a cocaine overdose, it was clear that something needed to change. They started implementing a rule which gave players the ability to avoid a lifetime ban if they came forward about their drug use. But if they didn't, yeah, they were cooked. Suns player Walter Davis was one of these players to take that deal, checking himself into a rehab facility in late 1985 for drug abuse. But let's fast forward a little bit to February of 1987 when the Suns were having a rough start to their season due to injuries, including their center James Edwards, who was out of commission after an Achilles injuries in November. He would stick around the team, attending meetings and such, but when it came time to party, Edwards would attend a few nightclubs in Phoenix with a select group of players. There was one night in particular where Edwards would ramble onto a nightclub manager at the nightclub Mallarkeys that an upcoming game against the Milwaukee Bucks would not exceed 226 points. But that night, he had a couple of Bucks players with him, which is where things get interesting. Those 2 players, Jack Sikma and Paul McKeskey, denied that any conversation was had regarding anything other than some friendly conversations. And well, you would definitely be surprised to learn that the game between the Suns and the Bucks a couple nights later would only finish with 222 points. The team would go on to lose 2 more games to extend a losing streak to 5, but things just looked off. The players weren't meshing, and it seemed like the longtime coach, John McLeod, had lost the locker room. He would be replaced with a former Suns player, even though the guy had never coached before. And after finishing the season, he too would be replaced. And by then, an investigation had started. Although it had started long before, in early April, the Arizona Republic published an article which revealed the investigation that had begun, admitting that the Suns were already up against the wall. Game tapes and score sheets were seized. More and more evidence came forth, and things became clearer and clearer. However, there was a specific footage that they were interested in, and that game was the February 21st affair between the Bucks and the Suns. And on April 17th, just one day before the end of the regular season, law officials would announce indictments on 13 individuals involved in a cocaine trafficking conspiracy. 3 of those guys were active Suns players, namely James Edwards, Jay Humphries, and Grant Gondrezick. 2 of them were former players, and the rest were a group of associates and acquaintances to Sun players. They were also able to pinpoint the main cocaine dealers to the Suns in the 80s, and even a bit earlier, which were 2 brothers, Win and Kim Leisure. They had sold to many notable Sun players, such as Walter Davis and the 2nd overall pick in the 1969 draft, Neil Walk. Walter Davis had taken a lot of heat in the process of the investigation because of his involvement with drugs in the past, and the list of players that he gave up when he first cooperated was staggering. It involved current teammates, former teammates, and even players on opposing teams, 17 to be exact. But he said that at the time he had no choice, but in reality, he was given immunity for his actions, and so there wasn't really anything on the line. But after bartender Charles Keenan was wired up by prosecutors, he was able to capture a conversation with James J. Jordan, a manager, where Jordan admitted to supplying Walter Davis with cocaine and throwing a bet down on that one Bucks Suns game. But these recordings were never brought to court. A lot of the players would get off without much punishment due to some issues in the investigation, but things were all but normal afterwards. Key witness Johnny High would be killed while driving under the influence later that year. Grant Gondrezick would be out of the league very shortly after. Suns center Nick Vanos would be involved in a plane crash in August in which all passengers perished, and Walter Davis would never reach the highs that he did in the prior stages of his career. After the scandal, things were weird in Phoenix. Players were moved and a new era began, once Kevin Johnson and later Charles Barkley found a home in Arizona. Luckily, due to the help of some stars and especially MJ, the sport would reach new highs and move on from the drug-filled drama which had seemed to follow them everywhere. If you asked Michael Jordan who his basketball inspiration was prior to entering the NBA, what do you think his answer would be? Magic, Bird, Kareem, maybe even Dr. J? Well, no. The man that inspired and paved the way for the greatest of all time was none other than the Skywalker David Thompson. Entering the NBA, this guy, no question, looked to be the next face of basketball, going 30-1 in his historic college career. This guy was doing things that no one had seen before. Not only was he jumping 4 feet off the ground with a vertical nearing 45 inches in the 1970s, but Thompson and his North Carolina teammate actually invented the alley-oop as a centric point in their offense to take advantage of his monumental leaping ability. This guy was a show to watch and even drew in a young Michael Jordan, as even though MJ would of course attend UNC, he grew up a fan of North Carolina State University due to the Showtime 2 guard that played strikingly similar to his airness in later years. The world was excited by the high leaper, similar to the Zion craze of recent years, but unlike Zion, David Thompson didn't disappoint at any level. As the first overall pick in both the ABA and NBA drafts, David Thompson would take his talents to Denver, where prior to Nikola Jokic, David Thompson was the best talent to ever call the Mile High City his home. Finishing second in MVP voting with near 27-4, as well as 1.6 steals and 1.2 blocks, David Thompson was instantly one of the best two-way players on the planet. It almost took home a ring in his rookie year, as even with a 42-point explosion from Thompson, Dr. J would take home the win in a matchup that really should have started one of the best rivalries in basketball history. As the NBA and ABA would merge the following season, David Thompson would continue to blossom as one of the best scorers the NBA had ever seen. With insane vertical separation and a good mid-range jumper to pair, there wasn't many that could compare as a perimeter scorer at the time, putting up an average of 26 a game on good efficiency over the next 3 years. The individual dominance of Thompson was incredible to watch. I mean, this guy still is third all-time in single-game scoring after dropping a ridiculous 73 points in a single game with no three-point line. As the world was set to watch who should have been the savior of the league blossom, the Denver Nuggets would lock up their star with the highest contract in basketball, paying him $4 million over the next 5 years. Yeah, how things have changed. But at the time, things looked up for Thompson. And even though an injury in the 1980 season would result in him being sidelined half the year, coming back to average another 25 a game to bounce back made it seem that the ship was smooth sailing. But boy, was that so wrong. With a lot of time on his hands, the Skywalker found his new favorite time killer. Thompson began indulging in cocaine use as a way to cope with loneliness from the recovery process and as a way to deal with the pressure that comes with the immense fame and ridiculous expectations being the richest dude playing NBA basketball. David wasn't here for the money and fame that comes along with being one of the best players in the world. He was really just a quiet Christian kid who, in his word, didn't play basketball. He was a basketball player. As he lost his faith and lost basketball, that was essentially his identity as a man. The only thing that he could use to cope was the magic powder. As he seemed to be doing well in 1981 with a bounce-back season, 1982 was a completely different story. Putting up just 15 a game for the Nuggets, Thompson would be moved to the bench at 27 years old in what should have been the prime of his career. Due to ridicule from cashing the biggest checks in the NBA on the bench and the self-disappointment from his declining play, Thompson's fun coping mechanism would snowball into full-blown addiction. As the worse he played, the more he used, and the more he used, the worse he played. Thompson was moved to Seattle in the following season, where although his stats had dropped significantly from his peak, an early season run would earn him one more All-Star selection, averaging 16 points a game for the year. And sadly, this was really the last we'd see of David Thompson in the NBA. Thompson found himself back into a declining role as his play significantly fell every game it felt like. Frequented clubs more so than the practice facility, this would be the last stop of Thompson's career, as after getting into a fight in a New York nightclub, Thompson would fall down the stairs and suffer a career-ending knee injury that completely took the bird out of the sky. Trying to rebound with any role he could get, Thompson was cut from the Indiana Pacers before going on a drug-filled bender, which concluded in him being arrested for public intoxication. The kid who knew nothing more than playing basketball had just seen his life completely spiral out of control. Just a few years after signing the biggest deal in basketball, Thompson was spending $1,000 a day on cocaine, which resulted in a 1986 bankruptcy. With no money, no job, a destroyed reputation, and no credibility after fumbling a golden goose opportunity, Thompson would see his darkest days after being locked up for 180 days for assaulting his wife in 1987. The reality of this nightmare really hadn't even settled in, until while sitting in a jail, a TV segment would play honoring Dr. J on his brilliant career after announcing his retirement. 9 years after their matchup in his rookie season, when speaking on the best players he had the honor of matching up against, David Thompson was the first name he said. Despite being subject to an applause by the whole room, Thompson's reality finally clicked. He was no longer the Skywalker. His friend and counterpart in the league was being honored on national television for a legendary career, while he was sitting in a jail, broke and hopeless. After reaching rock bottom, I'm glad to say at least Thompson managed to build a life for himself after fumbling what should have been an all-time great NBA career. As after reverting back to Christianity in jail, Thompson remains sober with a healthy family to this day. Although Thompson's career never lived up to really anywhere close to what it should have been, he still remains rather respected for his excellence as a trailblazer in the league that only a few really got to appreciate. Richard Dumas had one of the most tragic and self-destructive career arcs in NBA history. A player who should have been a long-term contributor on a championship-level team, Dumas instead became another cautionary tale wasted by addiction. His story is not just about basketball, it's about a lifetime of substance abuse that started at an unbelievably young age and followed him through every phase of his life, eventually leading to his dark downfall both on and off the floor. His struggles with substance abuse didn't start in college or even high school. They started when he was just 5 years old. His father, unable to handle an energetic and hyperactive child with ADHD, resorted to an unthinkable solution, giving his son beer to calm him down. This set a precedent that would follow Dumas for the rest of his career. By the time he was 13, he had already graduated to cigarettes, marijuana, hard liquor, and painkillers. Most kids that age were just starting to experiment with small vices, if even. But Dumas was already in deep, relying on substances as just a function. The fact that he was still able to dominate on the basketball court made it even harder for anyone to intervene. His vices weren't slowing him down, so they were largely ignored. Dumas became a high school star in Oklahoma, winning 4 state championships and averaging over 20 points per game. But even then, his addiction was part of his routine. He wouldn't play unless he had a few beers beforehand. He suffered from severe anxiety under the bright lights of packed gyms, and alcohol became his crutch to get through games. This wasn't just a superstition. This was full-blown substance dependency at the high school level. Dumas had multiple colleges calling for his talents, but he decided to stay close to home and attend Oklahoma State University. At the same time, he made another life-altering decision, one that would completely alter the trajectory of his career. He took a single hit of a laced joint that contained crack cocaine. That moment was all it took for him to develop an addiction that would follow him for decades. Crack became his drug of choice, and being close to home meant that his access to drugs was unlimited. While his freshman season was impressive with 17 and 6 a game, his numbers declined every year after that. The more his drug use escalated, the harder it became to maintain his level of play. Dumas' problems weren't a secret in the locker room. Everybody knew what was going on. His talent was undeniable, but neither was his downward spiral. Eventually, Oklahoma State couldn't keep turning a blind eye. After repeated infractions, the team finally dismissed him, ending his college career for good. With his NBA dreams slipping away, Dumas took his talents overseas, playing in Israel. The cultural shock and being away from his usual environment forced him to make some changes. He managed to get clean enough to play at a high level, averaging 21 points, 8 rebounds, and 2 assists while shooting an astonishing 59% from the field. The resurgence made NBA scouts take notice once again. Rather than returning to college, he declared for the 1991 NBA draft, where the Phoenix Suns took a chance on him with the 46th overall pick. The gamble paid off at first, but the concerns that scared off other teams proved valid. Before he even played a single NBA game, he tested positive for cocaine and was suspended the entire 1991-1992 season. Once again, he went overseas to play while serving his suspension, eventually enrolling in John Lucas's rehab program. When he finally suited up for the Suns in the 93 season, it was clear why they had taken a chance on him. Dumas was a revelation, averaging 16 and 5 while making an impact on both ends of the floor. He was a major piece on a Suns team that made it all the way to the NBA Finals against Michael Jordan's Bulls, where he put up 16 a game on the biggest stage. After overcoming so much, it looked like Dumas had finally put his demons behind him. But this wasn't the case. In the offseason, Dumas went to Hawaii for an autograph signing event. While there, he was offered a hit of crack. What started as one spiraled into a full-blown relapse. By the end of the trip, he was driving to the other side of the island to help cook up more drugs, eventually getting stranded before the NBA had to step in and bring him back. He checked into rehab once again and returned for the 94 season, but he wasn't the same. The NBA had started cracking down on his drinking, preventing him from downing his usual six-pack before games, and without his usual vices, his performance plummeted. He played only 15 games before being waived. The Philadelphia 76ers gave him one last chance, but the magic was gone. In just 20 minutes per game, he managed only 6 points, looking like a former shell of himself, and by 26, his NBA career was officially over. What followed was a series of arrests, legal troubles, and failed attempts to get his life back on track. In 1997, he was arrested on drug-related charges in Arizona. In 2013, he was caught stealing thousands of dollars worth of merchandise from various retail stores. His life had spiraled so far out of control that he went from being a key player in the NBA Finals to being arrested for petty theft. Dumas is really a sad story. As a guy who started chasing the dragon at a disgustingly young age and was never able to beat the demons that plagued him. With two of the greatest talents to ever grace the frontcourt, the Houston Rockets should have been on a violent upswing at the tail end of the 1980s. Hakeem Olajuwon and Ralph Sampson were a frontcourt duo unlike anything the league had ever seen. A perfect blend of skill, size, and athleticism that made the Rockets instant contenders. They were young, hungry, and fresh off an NBA Finals appearance in 1986. But in reality, the decisions of a few, combined with some horrific luck, completely derailed what should have been the best team out west. While Hakeem and Sampson were the stars, every contender needs its unsung heroes. And for the Rockets, they came in the form of their backcourt duo, Lewis Lloyd and Mitchell Wiggins. These two guards weren't just role players. They were crucial pieces to Houston's championship puzzle. Lloyd was a silky smooth scorer, averaging 17 a game, while Wiggins chipped in with 11, providing much-needed perimeter help to complement the Rockets' twin towers. On the court, they were hard-nosed competitors, constantly pushing each other in practice. Off the court, they were inseparable, more like brothers than teammates. But while they were lighting it up on game nights, they were chasing another kind of high when the lights were off. Houston in the 80s was a city on the rise, and with that came a booming nightlife scene. Lloyd and Wiggins embraced it with open arms, frequenting the city's hottest clubs, rubbing elbows with celebrities, and finding themselves in all the wrong places with all the wrong people. They distracted themselves from the rest of the team, forming a tight-knit bond that revolved around basketball by day and partying by night. Then came the night that changed everything. The Rockets were 32 games into the 87 season. It was supposed to be the year they climbed back to the finals, but instead, it was the night their championship dreams completely died. After another long night out, the duo left a club when a stranger approached them. A fan, they thought. The man claimed he had the best product in the city and offered them a taste. Whether it was curiosity, peer pressure, or addiction taking hold, they accepted. The next morning, the party was over. Word spread quickly that the NBA had received an anonymous tip about Lloyd and Wiggins indulging in extracurricular activities. When they were called in and handed a drug test, there was no hiding from the results. Both tested positive for cocaine. The basketball world was stunned, but no one was more shocked than the Rockets. In one fell swoop, Houston lost its backcourts. Commissioner David Stern, determined to clean up the NBA's reputation, made an example out of them. Despite it being just their first offense, Stern came down hard, handing both Lloyd and Wiggins a lifetime ban from the NBA. Just like that, Two promising careers were over. The fallout was catastrophic. The Rockets, once poised to dominate the West for years to come, never recovered. Ralph Sampson's body soon after began to break down, and Hakeem Olajuwon was left to carry the franchise all alone. Lloyd and Wiggins took different paths after their bans. Wiggins fought hard to reclaim his career, eventually getting reinstated and playing a few more seasons, but he was never the same. Lloyd, on the other hand, drifted away from the game entirely. His once promising career left in the ashes of cocaine addiction. In hindsight, the Rockets weren't just victims of the circumstance. They were casualties of the NBA's cocaine era, a dark period where drugs claimed the careers of countless talented players. David Stern's hardline stance ultimately helped clean up the league, but it came at a price. For Lloyd and Wiggins, their mistake cost them everything. For the Rockets, it costed them a dynasty. Thank you for watching if you made it this far, and as always, I'll see you boys in the next one. Peace out.